What's up, New Hope family, and welcome to episode 18 of the show with no name. My name is David. I am so glad that you're here with us today. With me, as always, is Pastor Leo.
Come on, everyone.
Hello, Pastor Leo.
Hello, hello.
How are things?
Doing well.
Oh, that's good.
For the past 5 minutes, something like that. Yeah.
That's true. We just recorded episode 17, but as we're recording these, it's been very nice and warm.
Yes.
And I was just informed we're going to get a whole bunch of snow coming up.
Yes.
But when you're listening to this will have happened like a week ago. But I'm very unhappy about it. So if you saw me on March 19th or 20th, and I seemed like I was in a foul mood, this is why. Why are we? It's springtime. Let's just leave it.
Stop messing around with the temperature.
I would have rather just had winter continue until it's done. Yeah. Because the tease of spring makes the cold so much worse when it hits. Like when it was negative 65 or whatever wind chill. Right. And then it got up to like negative 10 and you're like, it's not so bad outside. Yeah. But then when it's like 65 degrees for a couple weeks and then the 5 degrees comes back. This has been my rant for the day. You're welcome, everybody. I needed to get this off my chest. Thank you to all of you for hearing it.
Maybe somebody was testing God.
Oh, man. It's Gideon's fault? Yeah. Come on, Gideon. Come on, Yerubbaal. Maybe I need to...
Him with his best 2 out of 3.
Maybe I need to hide from the Midianites more. And then I will be... I don't know. My test would not include freezing cold weather at this point. I'm not like I feel like this is fair. Of everyone on staff, I probably handle the cold better than most. Like it doesn't bother me that much. My office is often an icebox in the middle of winter because the heat does not reach that part of our building for some reason. And I'll be fine. I don't mind the cold, but it's the tease of spring.
Yes,
which is my second favorite season. Fall's my favorite. Just the crispness of fall. It's just the best. But I love spring. It means baseball's here. It means March Madness is here. And when that arrives and then leaves, man, I'm gonna need to pray. I'm harboring some bitterness towards the weather in my heart. Meteorologists, beware. Don't reach out to me this week. Leo, I feel like you would be a great meteorologist.
Am I?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you're not. I feel like you would be.
Well, I would be.
You certainly would need training, I assume. I don't think they just wing it. Although maybe they do. Maybe you just have to be really good at reading a teleprompter.
Maybe.
But I feel like...
But that thing with the green screen and they're pointing at the right direction.
You'd be all over that.
Right.
And just,
and like here in Wilson and I'm pointing to Bismarck.
I hope you take this as a compliment. I feel like you have the personality of a meteorologist.
Oh, do I? That's cool.
TV one, though, like a TV one. Just make me feel better about how terrible the weather is.
Like, we're going to have some very unsavory weather, but it's going to be a great day.
The meteorologists in Oklahoma, where we lived for 2 years before we moved here, they're just always bringing bad news because it's either just unbearably hot that you can't be outside, or there's twirly wind things trying to murder you. Like those are pretty much the two weather reports. Unbearably hot, insane storms that might blow your house down. Like those, I might be exaggerating a little bit, but not as much as I should be. Like this is too close to the truth. So I feel like the meteorologists there have to have like a really great personality so you don't hate them. Because they're only bringing bad news.
That's right.
4 days a year, they get to be like, it is so nice outside. Go out and enjoy yourselves. Other than that, it's 125 degrees with 125% humidity, which isn't even possible. But we figured it out because we're Oklahoma. And I feel like you could pull that off. I would forgive you for giving me bad news about the weather, Leo. So just, I know God's called you to be a pastor, and that's where you're at now. But just, as a side job, maybe you consider some light meteorology work.
We can do that. I'll apply at the local news station.
What's the we have one? That's the NBC affiliate. That's the only one we specifically have a Williston.
Yeah, that's true. What is that? KYF?
I don't know. I can't remember.
It's something.
John Cole works for that one. I know that because I talk to him a lot in my world as a basketball coach. But I also talk about judges a lot in my work as an online campus director. Man,
Segue.
2 weeks in a row with the segues. I'm pretty excited.
Awesome.
We are to Judges 7 this week. As always, if you haven't read yet, just pause us real quick. Make your good pause face like last week. Yeah, that was the
There we
perfect
go.
spot to pause
All
us. And then go read Judges 7 real quick, and then come back and join us.
There we go.
We'll count to 3, and then we'll welcome you back. Although you paused us,
Yeah.
so there's really no reason for us to wait. But
That's
I've
true.
done it anyway. Welcome back, everybody who had to read. But yeah, we don't read through the whole chapter every single week. These
No, we don't.
episodes would get way too long, so we encourage you to be reading throughout the week. So with that, Leo, would you start us off with our summary, as you always do, of Judges 7?
All right, since
What we're gonna learn
we're
this
still
week.
talking about Gideon,
We are.
God leaves no room for human boasting by purposefully using the weak for his purposes.
Yeah. That's great. That was a really short summary this week, Leo. Chapter starts, Gideon's hanging out. Well,
Yep.
not Gideon anymore.
Yerubbaal.
Yeah, which is odd. Like we have a lot of name changes in
Yes.
the Bible, right?
Yes.
Usually the name change sticks.
Yes.
This one doesn't really. Like we keep calling him Gideon.
It's easier to
And
say.
it is that is a good point. That is a good point. But for the person writing this, they were probably equivalently easy to say. Maybe not. I don't know. It's just interesting because it opens with then Yerubbaal, but then that is Gideon, and then they just go back to calling him Gideon the rest of the way. So it's I don't know. That one's interesting to me.
That's
like
true.
Once, I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. I never tried to see how to write Gideon and Yerubbaal
In Hebrew?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's easier to. It's like, this is hard.
Yeah,
I call him
that's possible.
Gideon.
That's possible. But anyway, he's hanging
That's
out.
why I call people by nicknames.
He's if in Leo's version of the Bible, none of their real names will be used. He's hanging out by a spring, just like having a grand old time with the army,
That's right.
and then God's like, "Hey, there's too many of you."
It's too much.
I don't. What a weird thing to hear. You have too many, especially in the ancient world where like numbers weren't the only thing. Just like today, numbers
Yep.
aren't the only thing that win you a battle. But boy, they certainly helped in hand. Like when you're fighting with a hand-to-hand combat, I would like to have more people.
Yes, true.
Just personally. If
It's
about
like
to
you have
fight
a
five-
basketball team and God says, you know
Yeah,
what?
5's too many.
Five's too many.
Why don't you send 2 guys out there and see what happens here? Yeah, this is exactly what this would be like if I went to my team and we're about to go for the tip-off.
That's
And I'm
right.
like, hey, you guys are going to get too much credit if we win this game 5-on-5. So 3 of you come with me on the bench and we're going to play 2-on-5 so I get all the glory when
That's
we win because
right.
I'm a brilliant
That's right.
tactician.
Why?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. What are we doing here?
All right. So, okay, a few lessons from this. All right. Number one, when it comes to Gideon, if you're sure that God is with you, if you know for a fact that God has called you to do something, and that's what we see in verse 1. Do something, stop procrastinating, just do it.
They worked.
So, and that's what Gideon does. Now that he knows, after he does the best 2 out of 3 with God, and he loses again. So, okay, that's he's with me. So he rose up early. He pitched a tent near a well of spring, so his army will have access to water and gain the higher ground.
Smart. Like it's not
Very smart.
Yeah, he's not.
That's right.
It's not for no reason.
So now that he knows that God is with him, he stopped procrastinating and just did it. Second, when it comes to the 300 and everything.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So number one, God is not indebted to anybody for their service. It ought to be the other way around. We ought to feel indebted to him for using imperfect, flawed people like us. I mean, think, if God is going to say, I'm going to wait for someone perfect to be born so I can use him for my glory, we'd be waiting forever.
I think the act of choosing spoiler alert, we're going to narrow it down to 300 here pretty quick. From a much bigger number, like some basic math here, 32,000 men. 300 is a lot less than that. Like I'd feel pretty good about 32,000, especially like we're fighting in tribal wars. Like we're not fighting against like the Roman Empire yet at this point, or even like the more fitting to the time. Like Egypt wasn't coming up to fight us, or the Assyrian Empire. Like we're fighting the Midianites, another tribe more similar to us. I've got 32,000. I got this thing.
That's right.
But this story of it narrowing down to 300 is probably tied with the fleece as like the most famous part of the Gideon story, right?
Yep.
How we narrow it down. But yeah, like why are we doing that? Because he says it, right? He doesn't want them to be able to boast.
Yes. No boasting. No boasting.
Yeah, because that's like what you talked about at the beginning. He wants. Basically, God wants the glory because he deserves the glory, and he doesn't want them to be able to say, we did this ourselves. But like, it didn't have to go down to 300. Like we could have done like 2,000. God's still getting the glory at 2,000, right?
That's right. 300 is a little bit too much.
Yeah. And I've always been interested too in like imagine being one of those people, and let's say you are like a fervent like follower of Yahweh at the time, right? Like you maybe your family was like Gideon's, and you were, swayed to worship false gods, but you're back on board. Like, no, we're doing the wrong thing. I'm going to worship God. I'm willing to go fight for my God. And then you get sent home, and then you get to like hear stories of like the greatest victory in the history of your people. And you're like, I drank water wrong, so I didn't get to be a part of that activity. Like, that's brutal.
That's right. This sucks. But yeah, that's okay. So, another lesson that we can learn from the 300 is just like in the same way that God used Deborah to one of the things that we talked about.
No one wanted to fight when Deborah was hanging around.
That's
now
right.
There's 32,000 of them, and it's too much. It's so fascinating. Again, obviously God's right, and I'm not, try just to clarify. I don't need your angry emails. But when I read it, I'm like, we just read about how no one was willing to step up and do this.
Now you got 32,000,
and now all of them are willing, and you're like,
nah,
no thanks.
We'll cut you.
But yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
But
Please continue your thought.
So in the same way that God used Deborah to shame the men because no one was willing to step up, God could have used the 300 to shame the Israelites. So think, if God can use 300 people to beat the Midianites now, he could have used the same
to
beat the Midianites then. Right? But the Israelites were too afraid to stand up to the Midianites. So, yeah. Okay. Second, or third point, in the face of strong and powerful enemies of any kind, it doesn't matter if it's a physical enemy, emotional enemies, mental enemies, especially spiritual enemies. Fearful, weak-hearted, and or weak-minded people are usually the first ones to give up. They're usually the first ones to give in. They're usually the first ones to procrastinate. They're usually the first ones to take their eyes off of the prize. Thus the tests.
Sure.
Like God was like, oh, you're going to get me like best 2 out of 3. I'm going to give you a test now. They're like, so, because they're usually the first ones to give in. They're usually the first ones to give up and take their eyes off the prize.
Yeah.
And then fourth, of course, again, God hates boasting. He made sure the nation of Israel knew who delivered them. It was not the 32,000, it was 300. It's not Gideon, it's not any of the men, it was God. The glory belongs to him.
And we get to maybe my favorite part of Judges 7, because Gideon, as we talked about, maybe not the bravest, naturally bravest guy on the planet. And we also talked about last, like God's aware of that.
Yeah.
Like he's not shocked that like, he knows who he's talking to here. So he doesn't even make Gideon ask this time. He's like, hey, go do this and you're going to be fine. But, and I'm going to read it because it's so, like I've talked about this before. Like God has some sarcastic humor to him in my mind sometimes.
He has a very dry humor.
But if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Pura, I don't know how to say it,
Pura.
Your servant, and you shall hear what they say, and afterwards your hands shall be strengthened to go down against the camp. And then it just immediately transitions into, then he went down. Like there was no, like Gideon thought about it for, like as soon as God said, but if you're afraid, Gideon's like, yeah, I'll take that one. which one was the thing to do if I'm afraid again? That's the one I'm doing. I didn't even listen to the first one to clarify. I'm only doing the afraid one. But I love that. But God, so one, God makes me laugh there. But two, God knows what Gideon needs.
Yes.
He needed the reassurance, with the 2 out of 3, right? We talked about that at the end of episode 17 when we were talking about chapter 6. God knew Gideon needed that reassurance. It wasn't a great moment of faith for Gideon, but it was Gideon needed that reassurance, and God was aware of that and was willing to give it to him.
Yep.
Not that he had to, but he was willing to. And this is God doing that again, not even making Gideon ask this time. He's just like, I know you're going to need this.
Yep.
And I've got this for you because I know you.
Yep.
I like that. I think that's cool.
So God gives Gideon the reassurance that he needs. So the lesson here is simple. It's easy to make fun of Gideon's need for constant
I think we just did that for a couple minutes. That's
my
bad.
Yeah. It's easy to make fun of it because it is funny if we think about it. But if we really think about it, we're no different.
No, we're not.
We are not any different. We see many videos of kids who freeze, who get scared and ask for reassurance from their parents because they're being made to do something that they're not used to. Like, for example, dancing on stage, and it's your first time. Kids get scared of doing that. Talking to for the first time to a parent who's been deployed overseas. The kids that are forever traumatized by that dancing light up cactus. Have you seen that?
No. What are you talking about?
There's a dancing light up cactus that records what you're saying and then says it back in a squeaky voice.
No, I have not
so
seen
they put it in front of babies, and babies make some noise, and then
it makes it back at them,
and then
just
they get
freaks them out.
scared, like
wow, that seems fun. Terrorize your children with a cactus.
That's the thing. So it's the same when we're older. At school, we had times when we needed reassurance from teachers, from friends, from coaches, like David.
Hey, I'm one of those.
Yeah. So same at work, right? We have experienced times when we needed constant reassurance from our boss, especially when we are asked to do something new or different. I know because when I was asked to do this, when Pastor Mike took over, I needed reassurance from him. And it's like, are you sure? But yeah, so if God didn't say to Gideon, think about it, because of our constant need for reassurance, it happens to us too. And God didn't say to Gideon, you know what? You're pathetic for seeking constant reassurance. You suck. Yeah. Get out of here. I'll find someone else. He didn't do that. So if God didn't do that, we shouldn't either. So yeah.
There's this isn't like a super important part, but I do enjoy the subtlety of like the storytelling in it. So Gideon goes down to try to do some spying basically. Right. But they like just slip in descriptions of how vast this army is, right? It's because it's not just the Midianites; it's the Midianites and the Amalekites are together, and it just casually drops in like there's tons of. I mean, they call them locusts in a field, and as vast as like the sand is on a beach. I mean, there's a lot of them.
It's a huge army.
Them. But Gideon goes and he hears some guy talking about a dream he had, and he gets that reassurance that he needs, and
that's right.
So now we get to the fightins.
Yay!
What do we learn from that? I mean, because honestly, it just kind of sounds like it's like okay, that's just kind of
the midnight
the story of what happened. Yeah, it is a midnight fight. Terrible time in the world to be fighting it. There's no night vision goggles. Like what are we doing? But yeah, what are we?
He suddenly had a dream that he was a part of the SWAT team.
Oh, interesting. So we've got the ones who drank the water correctly still with us. 300 of them.
Yep.
And we're gonna go fight now at midnight. What are we learning from this?
Okay, so Gideon's attack is a model of how to conduct a surprise attack. You need secrecy. Very few people knew that Gideon was going to attack that night. You need suddenness. No time was wasted. Gideon moved immediately. Simplicity is another key. Gideon gave no complicated instructions. He's like, you got to do this, and then you gotta do a couple of cartwheels and all of that. So no, it was very simple. And then strategic timing. Gideon and his men arrived at about midnight, when the change of guard was more likely. to cause confusion. Now, for those who are thinking that this kind of thing happens only in stories, there is a reason why there are a lot of shorts or reels or videos on social media of pranks that are done on people who are... That's the kind of thing that I'm watching. So I'm talking about...
You've been watching weird videos on the internet lately, Leo.
Babies who get
That's mostly
traumatized and people sleeping and being pranked.
I can vouch for this. Me and one of my best friends pranked another one of our best friends at like 3:00 in the morning in college. Like pulled him out of his dorm bunk and made him. Anything we said, he was convinced was reality for about 3.5 minutes, and then he finally woke up and tried to attack us.
See, that's the thing.
So yes,
there is truth to that.
There is some reality to that.
So panic is very contagious. There is a reason why there are tons of cases of human stampedes, aka crowd surges or crushes. I did a quick Google search. Just in the previous decade, we're talking about 2010s. That's 2010 to 2019. There were around 4,440 people estimated to have died in about 49 instances of crowd stampedes. That's just in 10 years. Yeah. That's an average of about 5 instances and around 440 people dying per year in stampedes. So it's not
And these are
uncommon.
these are usually like at a sporting event or a concert, like these, it's not, we're not talking in war.
Right. We're not talking about war. We're talking about like a crowd of people just in one place and then suddenly something happens. So yes, the strategy was effective, but it was also clearly the Lord who brought about the victory. So in the confusion, God caused the Midianites to turn on each other. So that's verse 22. Then Gideon called out for help in chasing the runners. That's verse 23. And he gave a special assignment to the men of Ephraim. They were able to capture and kill 2 of the Midianite leaders in verse 25. So
are there any, clearly there's some sound military strategy to it, right? The midnight attack, the confusion, again, it's midnight and you wake up and you're terrified. And obviously, like one of the things you learned from that dream that he overheard is these people were already scared of Gideon.
Yeah.
Like they were, for whatever reason, they were fearful of the Israelite army that they were just about to fight. And they probably didn't know that there were only 300 Israelites, right? Like for all they knew, 32,000 of them were surrounding them right there and about to attack. So the fear is understandable. And even today, you see instances of like friendly fire and things like that happening modern warfare with all of the technology and things that we have. So it's very reasonable. So it's cool to learn all those things. But are there any other what can I learn from Gideon's sound military tactics and which guy killed what guy at what rock and what am I learning from this?
Let's do a GLS. We're going to do a global leadership.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we're going to teach some
Good
leadership.
For GLS.
Yeah. Speaking of which, it's almost time in the summer. But anyway, leadership tips and strategies for us. Even in stories like this, there are lessons that we can apply to our daily life. Leaders, here's the first one. Leaders, I'm talking to you. We need to be thoroughly convinced about what we're doing before we can lead others. You need to be thoroughly convinced of what you're doing, because if you're not, they're going to sense it. Josh Axe is quoted as saying, you can only lead someone as far as you're willing to go yourself. So you need to be thoroughly convinced of what you're doing. Second, we need to be worshipers first. We need to always give God his rightful place. We talked about this before in a Romans deep dive too. We need to put God first, not just in terms of Sundays or worship and everything. We need to put God first in everything.
Yeah.
Matthew 6:33 says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all of these things will be given to you as well. Third point, leaders, we need to always lead by example. We need to always lead by example. Mahatma Gandhi is quoted as saying, be the change you want to see in the world. And fourth, we need And we must be careful that the credit goes where it belongs. To God first, then to the instruments of his choosing. But to God first. So here's the bottom line. Bottom line for this is God knows how weak our hearts can get. He is no stranger to our tendency towards selfishness. Gideon's story proves how God is faithful, how God is mighty, and how God is true to his word. This story reminds us of God's strength in our weakness. He is powerful over every human strength and weakness. So here are your head change, heart change, and life change for this episode. Head change is this. Know the only strength that we can boast in is God's, not our own. Heart change, feel humility at God's strength in comparison to our weakness. Not your strength compared to your weakness. Compare that to God's strength. Feel that humility so that he receives proper glory for all he does in and through us. Mm-hmm. And your life change is this. Resist the urge to boast in our own accomplishments or strengths and instead extend that glory to God and God alone.
Mm. You have questions for us this week as well?
Nope.
All right.
I'm just kidding.
So okay.
All right. Okay, so here are your questions. Number 1, what weakness has God used in your life to teach you to depend on him?
We talked about this at lunch today, actually, with Pastor Mark.
Oh.
Just somehow we were talking about interviews. I think one of our pastors was talking about like when their interview for like the ordination and everything like that. And so I brought up I wonder if they did well, what are your weaknesses? And then they give it, well, I just work too hard and I just care too much about people. And are those the weaknesses I can answer? Well, God just, I just work so hard and I'm so giving and caring. That's the one God's used in my life.
That's a good one.
Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, what weakness has God used in your life?
Hopefully it's a better one than that.
That's true.
Or a worse one? I don't know. A real one. Maybe a real one.
Maybe a real one.
Question 2.
All right, question 2. What do you think is at the source of our desire to boast in ourselves? Self-reflection time. And number 3, what is one practical thing you could do this week to choose selflessness over selfishness?
And then our next step for next week, we're gonna deal with the aftermath of Gideon.
Aftermath.
Although chapter 8 is all Gideon still.
Yes.
And then the aftermath, because we're gonna read Judges 8 through Judges 10 verse 5, because the first 5 verses of chapter 10 it's another not real deep dive on a judge.
That's right.
So, or is it 2? No, it's one judge, right? The
son
of
one
someone.
judge.
Yeah. So Judges 8 through Judges 10 verse 5. That's our next step for next week. Read along with us. And yeah, Gideon's going to get a third episode.
Yay.
And then the aftermath of Gideon.
For best 2 out of 3?
Best two out of 3. Gideon kind of loses because, spoiler alert, he dies next week.
Yes.
Gideon not still alive today. I hate to be the one.
Seriously?
I hate to be I know, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad
I thought I
news,
saw him in Las Vegas.
That was Elvis.
Oh, that was
thinking of
Elvis.
Yeah,
Okay.
different guy. Well, thank you, Pastor Leo, as always.
You're
really
welcome.
Appreciate your teaching. Really enjoying going through Judges with you. I know a lot of you are as well. Make sure you jump in the comments and answer some of those questions, reply to somebody else's answers, things like that.
Please.
Let's build our community that way and continue to grow in our relationship with God, with one another in this community we have online. And then, read along. Next episode will go live next Wednesday. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done that yet. All that good stuff. We love you, New Hope family. We're so thankful to have you a part of this podcast with us. And until we see you next time.
Ingat!